Today we're ranking every character from the Sonic the Hedgehog movie trilogy from good to evil. Spoilers ahead. And as usual, we'll start with the most pure-hearted and noble character and work our way down to the most evil. These characters are the good. And the gold medal of good has to go to Shadow's departed best friend, Maria, the granddaughter of Dr. Gerald Robotnik. Maria is sweet and innocent to the core. She became Shadow's first and best friend almost immediately upon meeting him, giving him some joy during his time being poked and prodded by Gunn. On top of being a good friend, Maria is also remarkably sensitive. For instance, after the pair watch a monster movie together that uses the term alien freak, she immediately takes Shadow out to see the stars and assures him that he's not dangerous or a monster, which, 1 out of 2 isn't bad. Sadly, when Gunn tried to take Shadow away from his family, a stray bullet resulted in an explosion that tragically took Maria's life. She was definitely taken too soon, but her light managed to live on in Shadow despite being covered in plenty of angst. You know you've got a good heart when your death is the literal only thing it takes to drive one man mad, and one child mad with sheer uncontrollable rage. Which is why Maria definitely earns the gold medal of good. Taking the silver medal of good is Rachel's daughter, JoJo. While she is a very minor character, we'd be remiss not to mention her small but pivotal role in Sonic's development as a hero. That's right, everyone. Those iconic red shoes, they were given to Sonic by JoJo. The absolute legend gave up a perfectly good pair of shiny red athletic shoes just so Sonic wouldn't hurt his feet running around.
No one's ever given me a gift before.
She's as pure-hearted as Maria, pretty much. The only thing making her the surefire runner-up is the fact that she took so long to untie her mother in the first movie. On the other hand, I get your decision, JoJo, and I respect it. Now, this may be a surprise, but the bronze medal of good has to go to Longclaw, Sonic's early childhood guardian. A good parent, a devoted protector, died to protect her young, all that good stuff.
I'm trying to make you proud.
But we also wanted to talk about the one time where Longclaw was a little bit morally questionable. During the Master Emerald's origin story in the second movie, we find out that the Master Emerald was forged by a tribe of Echidna warriors, and for fear that its power would fall into the wrong hands, was stolen by the Owls, starting a long feud that would only be resolved once both sides were practically extinct. Now, we all know the Owls were doing what they thought was best for the world, but we also have to acknowledge that's technically theft. And maybe the Echidnas were already planning to keep it under wraps. In any case, Longclaw didn't exactly have too much to do with it, but it's still just enough to make her a little more questionable than our top 2. Now let's talk about the main heroes, starting with Tom and Maddie Wachowski. We're ranking these two in the same spot for the simple fact that, in this movie especially, their good deeds are generally done together. One is a small-town cop with a heart of gold, and the other is a small-town vet with another heart of gold. Together, they are the only ones capable of guiding Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles to be responsible, make good choices, and learn how to make this whole family thing work.
Don't worry, little sibling rivalry is healthy. Me and my brothers used to do this kind of thing all the time.
Right off the bat, they both deserve a ton of credit for taking in 3 supernatural alien creatures as their children, despite the constant risks of government conflicts, property damage, and all sorts of wild danger. But they both get even more hero points for the fact that they consistently help them out with their plans. In this movie saw them on their most dangerous adventure yet. The pair helped Team Sonic break into Gun HQ, risking their lives and potentially their freedom to help save the world from the Robotniks. The worst we could say about either of them, really, is stuff we could say about basically any human being. Like, sometimes they look at someone who isn't their spouse and say, wow, they're cute, without acting on it. But at the end of the day, these two are legends, and that hasn't changed a bit in the new movie. And let's not forget that Tom took a point-blank punch from Shadow and lived to tell the tale. And speaking of Tails, let's change the spelling a bit and talk about Miles Tails Prower. The gadget guy of Team Sonic, Tails has been stalking or admiring Sonic from afar for a long time, to the point where he was the one who saved him from an attack by Knuckles in the second movie, potentially saving the Blue Blur's life. Tails is the smartest of the main trio, but he's also the most compassionate.
Everyone calls me Tails. You're probably wondering why.
The kind of guy who wouldn't hurt a fly if he could help it, and who always dedicates himself to supporting the team. On 2 different occasions happens in the third movie, he shows up in the nick of time to make sure Sonic can do his thing, most notably in the final act, where he becomes a makeshift base of ball to try and save Sonic from plummeting to a fiery death. And no, I'm not making that up. That's an honest description of events. Tails is the kind of guy who may be more brains than brawn, but he's still always reliable as a support system, both in battle and as a friend in general. But I know you're tapping your foot in anticipation, so worry not. Sonic the Hedgehog has still earned himself a high spot on our list. This shouldn't be too much of a surprising placement for him, because Sonic has consistently been a good representation of a hero who's both genuinely good and flawed at the same time. We could bring up all the times he saved the world and cost the town millions in property damage in the process.
Pretending to be Batman.
Blue Justice, trademark pending.
But let's focus on the new movie. Sonic's biggest fault here is his ego, which leads to him often thinking he can charge into danger himself, and more often than not, results in him either going way too far or almost getting himself killed. He almost gets vaporized by a force field due to sheer impatience, and would have straight up died if it weren't for Tails, and he was fully ready to attack Shadow with the Master Emerald, despite knowing the danger after he hurt Tom. We don't blame him for being mad, but the whole summoning godlike powers for revenge thing is a bit questionable. But needless to say, Sonic is still much more good than bad. He's an animal lover willing to give turtles the chance to go fast, and the guy who's always eager to turn an enemy into a friend. We saw this in the second movie where he offered Knuckles true friendship and a shot at redemption. And in the third, he does one better by helping Shadow to finally let go of his rage and use his strength for good, risking his neck to help stop Robotnik's laser from blasting the Earth into smithereens. Sonic's the first guy who will kick your butt if you're doing wrong, but he'll also be the first one to help you up and get you on a better path, which is a sign of a pretty heroic guy if you ask us. But let's round out the main trio with Knuckles, the mighty Echidna warrior. If Knuckles' iconic friendship with Wade wasn't enough to sell you on how much he's grown since his debut in the sequel, this movie makes his devotion even more clear. On top of being great comic relief, Knuckles is a devoted protector to his friends and the Master Emerald. He catches a car that would have otherwise crushed Team Sonic, saved Sonic and Tails from falling to their deaths in the final act due to the latter passing out, and even found a loophole in the team's pact to trust the Emerald in Sonic's hands. When you put it like that, without Knuckles, Sonic and Tails would have died at least twice in this movie, and Shadow would have been no match for Sonic. That earns him a ton of hero points. The only reason we aren't placing him any higher is his punch first, ask questions later mentality, which can mostly be traced back to how he was raised as an Echidna warrior.
Destined to restore honor to my tribe and willing to destroy anything that gets in my way.
We do have to give him the Darwin Sinner Medal though, because while he certainly isn't stupid, he is very naive about how the world works, often taking things much more literally than they're meant to be taken, or falling for deceivers like Robotnik. That doesn't take away from his dedication, bravery, and kindness though. Calling him less than a hero would be an immeasurable dishonor. But let's talk about one last fuzzy friend, Azie. Azie is the family dog, and that's basically where his character begins and ends. He certainly doesn't have any evil traits, but he also doesn't have any particularly heroic ones either. He's just a good boy, though he does get the Envy Sinner Medal since the third movie revealed that he feels like Sonic and the gang stole his owners from him. Could this be setting Azie up to be the next big villain in the Sonic cinematic universe? No, he's just a dog. Try to keep up. Now, a quick mention of Wade is in order. Considering how Wade has like 2 minutes of screen time in the third movie, we don't feel the need to spend too much time on him. Sure, some would call him cowardly for often being used by the villains in the trilogy, but we just call him a normal human being for that. Like, if I'm in a room full of mysterious people pointing guns directly at me, I'm not gonna try and rock the boat too much. At the end of the day, Wade is just a regular small-town cop trying to do his job without getting murdered, and since Knuckles put him in charge of guarding the Master Emerald, we know that he's a good man who's at least trying to help out.
Knuckles. You know, I knew a kid in middle school named Knuckles. Could fit his whole fist in his mouth.
It isn't a Sonic movie without a meal at a weird restaurant, but the Chow Garden staff offered a fun subversion of that tradition. What I mean by that is that in this cutesy restaurant, Sonic and friends aren't subject to hostile psychopaths trying to start fights with them for practically no reason. They're friendly alien mascots doing their friendly alien mascot jobs, which earns them a spot just on the edge of our good section. But if there's one character who fits even closer to that edge, it's the edgelord himself, Shadow the Hedgehog. Hedgehog. Yeah, I said it. Shadow's a good guy, though not for the majority of the movie, to be fair. Shadow is more than happy to throw hands, hovering roller skate shoes, and motorcycles with anyone who crosses him. And if a few buildings get blown up or a few people get hospitalized in the process, so be it. It's all for the sake of his sweet, sweet vengeance.
Walk away before you get hurt.
And if there's any character who had every right to go villain, it's Shadow. I mean, he watched government agents hold his best friend and creator at gunpoint and ultimately take Maria's life, which filled him with sheer agony and grief. Add on the fact that he was subsequently imprisoned for 50 years, forced to relive everything he'd been through in his mind, and you have a Hedgehog who was truly broken beyond repair. Well, minus the beyond repair part. After Sonic spares him during their battle, Shadow finally opens up about his pain from losing Maria, and with some encouragement from Sonic, he finally comes to his senses and helps Sonic stop Eggman's giant laser from destroying the Earth. We'd place him way higher for a deed like that if it weren't for him playing such a huge role in activating the laser to begin with. But in any case, he was willing to die in order to right his wrong, and if it weren't for that very last post-credit scene, we'd honestly assume he did just that. But now, let's move on to the characters who don't fit fully into the good or bad sections. This is the gray area. We'll kick things off with Knuckles' ancestors, the Echidna tribe. As we briefly mentioned earlier, the Echidna warriors forged the Chaos Emeralds and combined them into the Master Emerald, an artifact that bestowed godlike powers that would make any one person into a warrior who could take down armies. As we also briefly mentioned earlier, the Emerald was stolen by the Owls to protect it from evil, believing that nobody should have so much power for fear of what it could do in the wrong hands. Moral ambiguity of the creation aside, that emerald was the property of the Echidnas, so we can't blame them for fighting so hard to get it back. We can blame them, however, for antagonizing Longclaw when all she was doing was protecting baby Sonic. That wasn't cool, guys. But next up we have Crazy Carl, or should we call him Perfectly Reasonable Carl. He may not have gotten the Blue Devil's name right, sure, but he was right about there being a mysterious blue alien with supernatural powers, and we can only imagine how much he's been rubbing it in the other residents of Green Hill's faces ever since. We don't know too much about him aside from his observation skills though, so he stands in neutral territory. So let's talk about Rachel, Maddie's sister. Admittedly, she's come a long way since her debut appearance. Okay, honestly, no, she really hasn't. But she's come some way. Despite initially hating Tom for no reason other than sheer bitterness and spite, she was fully ready to bury the hatchet when she finally got a ring on that finger, though not without a few threats. Rachel isn't evil by any means, but if you cross her, you can expect her to cross you right back and then some. When she finds out her wedding was a sham posed by Gun to lure Sonic into their clutches, she goes into a rage and tries to run Randall over. Not to mention hold Commander Walters at gunpoint.
Is that supposed to be a weapon?
Well, I don't know, but we're gonna find out.
Her anger was absolutely understandable, but maybe dial back the violence just a little bit. She isn't in the third movie aside from a holographic disguise worn by Maddie, where her rage comes in handy getting the duo into Gun's headquarters. So who knows? Maybe we'll see her become part of Team Sonic 2 one day. I'm not sure how much I want to see that, but we might see it. Next up we have Director Rockwell. Really, she falls into the just doing my job category. She doesn't have a problem deceiving others to get her business done. That said, while her business can lead to some shady stuff, in the big picture, she plays a vital role in protecting government secrets like Robotnik's superweapon from falling into the wrong hands. We can't fault her for keeping unauthorized personnel from accessing stuff that could get them and others killed, but we wouldn't call her a full-on hero per se, at least not yet. Now, nearing the end of our gray area is Undercover Agent Randall. We have to take away a lot of points from him for getting involved with Operation Catfish, because while, yes, he was technically just doing his job, he still strung along a relatively innocent woman for the sake of capturing Sonic. It's a pretty nasty thing to do, but to his credit, his love for her did end up being genuine, and the two are even married in the current timeline. That's nice and all, but, well, what if he hadn't fallen in love? He would have caused Rachel to have trust issues issues for the rest of her life, all for the sake of imprisoning an alien who's the only thing keeping his planet from being dominated by a psychotic Eggman. He isn't all bad, but he's willing to do some messed up stuff for work. And our last, not quite evil character is Commander Walters. A high-ranking leader in gun, we were admittedly pretty hard on this dude in the second movie. On one hand, setting up a fake wedding as a sting operation to lure innocent alien creatures in for imprisonment leads to a pretty bad track record.
Every single aspect of Operation Catfish was a complete fabrication.
That's not even mentioning him thanking Tom and Maddie for their city-saving efforts with a $50 Olive Garden gift card. We get it, dude. You're sponsored. But thankfully, the third movie kinda redeemed him in our eyes. At least somewhat. He offers Team Sonic intel about Shadow and his origins, and while it's revealed that he was the one who made the tough call to imprison Shadow for 50 years, we find out later that he was also the one who desperately tried to stop some of the government agents from shooting at Maria. He may not have succeeded, but he was one of the only men in the room who wanted to protect a literal child from needless bloodshed, which definitely earned him some hero points in our book, despite his otherwise shady morals. But now let's get down to our bottom 5 characters. These characters are the bad and the evil. And kicking things off in this section, we have the man, the myth, the legend, the Rock, Agent Stone himself. Okay, first things first, he gets the Lust Sinner medal. I don't care how you interpret his feelings for Robotnik, but one thing's for sure, Stone loves this man. Robotnik is his entire world, to the point where when he's missing, he'll draw his face in latte art to cope, and drop quite literally everything to return to his side once he returns. As heartfelt as his care for the Doctor is, though, we can't excuse him for knowingly aiding and abetting a global terrorist who openly plans to enslave all of humanity to machines. It's a shame because outside of Robotnik's influence, Stone seems like a pretty chill guy. Maybe not a model citizen, sure, but when he was briefly alone with Tails and Shadow, respectively, he seemed to enjoy their company and doesn't do much evil on his own terms. He's one of those characters who's just really weird to rank, but he seems like the type who could be rehabilitated in the future. So for now, we'll call him the least evil of the villains. Now this is an unconventional pick, but we have to have the Siberian bar clientele from Sonic 2. Yes, it's finally time to return to that good old tradition of Sonic and friends eating at weird restaurants. Tails uses an English to Russian translator to place his and Sonic's order at the joint, but it accidentally mistakes what he said for an insult.
Where'd you get all these cool gadgets?
I invented them.
Naturally, the people in the bar respond to this by literally attempting to murder Sonic and Tails by throwing them in a fire pit. They're only stopped when Tails calls for a pivonka, aka a dance battle, and it's only after the pair win that they're allowed to leave with their skin uncharred and intact. As fun of a conclusion as that was, this is still a case of a xenophobic group of people attempting to murder 2 alien children for almost no reason at all, so they've earned a low spot regardless. For our bronze medal of evil, let's round out that tradition with the bar bikers from the first movie. Like the Siberian bar people, these guys were quick to antagonize Sonic and Tom, threatening the 2 hipsters to leave or else. The only thing that places them lower than the last bunch is the fact that Sonic and Tom didn't even have to accidentally insult them before they made their threats, and when Sonic dared fight back, they were fully ready to let loose their most violent impulses. But we've reached the bottom 2 now, and I think it's fairly obvious where this is going. Let's get to the main malicious man himself, Dr. Ivo Robotnik. I don't think this is a hot take, nor one that needs much explanation. He's deceptive, treacherous, cruel, and downright evil. From his ultimate dream of enslaving humanity to machines to his constant abuse of Stone, the only person who's ever sincerely cared about him, even down to using his grandfather as a test dummy in the laser room of the third movie. There are practically no lengths Robotnik won't go to in order to get his way.
Let's do this!
His absolute disdain for any human being that isn't him, and sometimes Stone, earns him the Pride Center Medal. But the third movie made a pretty interesting change to his character. He actually has a moral compass. A very, very, very tiny moral compass. But a moral compass nonetheless. When Gerald reveals his plan to annihilate the Earth, himself, Robotnik, and Shadow in one massive explosion, even he has to take a step back and pitch the idea that instead of literally eviscerating all life on Earth, Earth. They should work together to rule it. Sure, that isn't much better, but it's certainly a little better. And in the end, Robotnik uses what were seemingly his last moments to try and stop his grandpappy's evil plan. With the help of Shadow and Team Sonic, he manages to keep the ship's imminent explosion from harming the Earth, and even sending one last message out to Stone, expressing gratitude for his friendship before he seemingly dies in the explosion. It may not make up for all the evil things he did, it definitely doesn't, in fact, but he made one good, selfless decision in his final moments, and he was at least able to become a hero for at least a little bit. But first, this video is brought to you by WickedBinge channel memberships. You can gain access to our videos early before anyone else, plus get members-only emojis and loyalty badges by supporting the channel through a membership. With that said, the gold medal of evil has to go to none other than Grandpappy himself, Dr. Gerald Robotnik. Despite being a pretty easy pick for the most evil, Gerald isn't all bad, at least not in terms of his motivation. He genuinely loved his granddaughter Maria to the point where her death sent him into such a downward spiral of grief that he wanted to destroy the entire Earth, an amount of painful drive that earns him the Wrath Center Medal. The difference between Gerald and other vengeful characters like Shadow or even other supervillains like Dr. Robotnik is the fact that Gerald wasn't able to move on, nor did he seem interested in doing so. Think about it, all of the movie's antagonists had their own responses to the troubles they went through. Shadow finally opened up about his grief for Maria, accepted the reality of his life, and stopped isolating himself from people who care. Robotnik was evil, but he at least had a vision of what he wanted to make the world into. An incredibly twisted vision, but at least he had his values. And he spent his last few moments pouring his heart out to his only friend as he saved the Earth from exploding. Gerald, though, all he wanted was to take literally everything from everyone on Earth. By his own admission, his plot to destroy the world was never about what Maria would have wanted, but rather about taking Gunn, their families, their friends, and everyone else. Grief does things to people, but that's no excuse to try and do a murder-suicide on the entire planet, Gerald. So you earned the gold medal of evil, but you did make one heck of a bug zapper.